How's it going, everyone? So I've been looking into using this library called Agora to try to figure out how I can build something kind of like Zoom. You know how like in Zoom you can do voice calls and audio calls and video calls? I want to try to figure out like what would be the easiest way to build something using some type of video call library. So I want to show you what I built with React, and then I'm going to show you how you can build this. This has been like a learning experience. I'm still trying to learn more about this library, and yeah, so right now I basically have a website where you can click join room, and that's going to connect to a third-party service using a third-party library, which is basically going to show my webcam, right? And also the audio of my MacBook is going to be connected to other people as well. So this is kind of what I've been, learning more about. I haven't really done much about styling or anything, but if you go ahead and open up a new tab through that same browser, anyone with this URL could potentially join that same web call, right? So notice I have my webcam and my audio. I have my audio turned up. I think I have it turned off right now. You can see that there's two webcams going, and there's two users on this like web conference call kind of. So I want to show you how I built this, and you can also leave the room and you'll see that this will update on the other tab as well. It's actually pretty easy to do using this Agora library, so definitely stick around if this is something you want to kind of learn more about. I'm having some fun learning about it, so yeah, let's just kind of dive into it. All right, so for this project, I'm going to be using something called Vite to basically create a bare bones React project. You can use Create React App or you can use Next.js, it doesn't really matter. As long as you kind of follow the same approaches I'm doing, you should be able to build out the same exact app. So I'm going to say npm create, I'm going to say Vite, and go ahead and do this directory that I'm currently in. And you will see that it's going to ask for a package name. I'll just say like Agora, I don't know, video call. And then you can kind of select what you want. I'm going to say React here. I'm going to say React. And then I'm going to say npm install to kind of set that all up. So now that that is done installing, I'm going to go ahead and install another third-party dependency called Agora RTC SDK NG. And this is the library that you can use to kind of connect to this third-party service called Agora. And I'll kind of show you all that in just a minute. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of show you like when you create a Vite application, you kind of get these generic files. So you have like app.jsx, and this has a bunch of just placeholder like code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say yarn dev, and that should kind of host this React application on port 3000. And once that's hosted, I should be able to go to that page. So let's go ahead and click on that. All right, so we got a basic React application. We're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and just delete all of this stuff, and we're gonna start kind of from scratch here. We don't need the logo, and we don't need, I guess we can keep app CSS, but let's just start with that, and we can kind of build upon that. So the first thing I wanna do is, remember in that example I showed you, we wanna have a page that kind of shows you a header that says like a WDJ virtual call. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make a header here, WDJ virtual call. And I wanna make sure this shows up. So let's go over here, this looks good. And then secondly, we're gonna just not use React Router. We're gonna keep this as simple as possible. So we wanna add a button called join room. Okay, so I'm gonna say join room. And inside of this button, it's going to actually invoke a function. So in React, you can kind of add an on-click listener and have it call a function. In this case, we're going to just basically use some state to toggle between one view and the next. So I'm going to say const joined, and set joined is equal to useState. And hopefully you're familiar with the useState hook. This is basically how you can keep track of state in React. And when someone clicks on join room, I just want to basically call that joined and set it to true. Okay. Now the idea is we're going to use this joined variable to toggle between different views. If you know more about React, you can bring in React Router, or you use like next routing, and like this is super easy to make different views. I'm gonna go ahead, and if we haven't joined yet, I'm gonna display that button. But if we have joined, I'm gonna go ahead and display a component that we haven't created. I'm gonna call it video room. And just go ahead and do this. And inside of source, I'm going to make a components folder. I'm going to say components. And inside of that components folder, I'm going to make a video room.jsx. So the idea is that when you actually click on that join room button, we are going to create a new component that's going to hook up to that Agora site. and kind of connect to the webcams and get that all set up. It's actually pretty easy to go and get that all going. So let's just verify that this works. If I click join room, make sure that video room shows up. And then also we should probably have our DevTools open down here in case we need to debug anything. All right, so going to the video room, this is going to be probably the most complex component of this tutorial. So I'm going to kind of show you how we can get something set up. I'm going to go ahead and import that third-party library that we kind of talked about. So I'm going to say agora RTC, and then I'm going to say from, and I believe it should automatically, I guess it doesn't, so I'll just do this. All right, so that's going to bring in that third-party package that has a bunch of methods we can kind of use to render out that video and connect to a remote, I believe it's using WebRTC server to get that all set up. But before we kind of dive into this, there are some things we want to set up. So if I go back to my other tab here, I'm already logged in to agora.io and I created an account. And you can kind of go and create a project. I went ahead and created one called WDJ Chat. And I have like an app ID. I'm going to go ahead and click on config. And that should take me to a page where I can get some more information about this application. Okay, so once you have this set up, you can kind of go to overview, click on your application. And I want to kind of show you what we can kind of do. So I'm going to copy app ID. There's a couple of constants we have to kind of pull into this UI. So I'm going to say const app ID is equal to this. And then I'm also going to say const token. In order to have your client connect to this this chat room, you have to have a token. Your client has to have a token. And if you get more serious about all of this, you're going to have to basically create a token server that's going to generate these things for you. But right now you can use Agora's UI and they can just kind of generate a token that allows you to gain access to a particular channel. So in our case, I'm going to make a channel called WDJ and click generate. And that's going to give us a token. So we're going to use that token and we're going to put it in our UI here. Okay, so that, again, this thing is to give us authentication for connecting to a chat room. And then finally, I'm going to make another constant called channel, and I'm going to say WDJ. So these are the three things we need to kind of set up the Agora library to connect to that server. And then the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a client. Okay, so this thing is what we need to also connect to that chat room. So there's a couple of basic configurations we need to set with this. I'm going to say mode is RTC, and then I'm going to say codec, which is kind of like the codec that's used for encoding your stream or your audio and your video. I'm going to go ahead and put that to VP8. These are like the defaults. But what we want to do is we are going to go ahead and try to connect when this component mounts. And there's quite a bit of code that we need to kind of put here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a use effect. This is kind of how you can make React do a side effect when a component mounts. So use effect with empty brackets here. And make sure that's imported, and it is. And what we can kind of do is we can go ahead and say client.on. And there's a couple of event listeners we need to listen to. The first one is we need to know when other users have joined this chat room. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to go ahead and say handle user joined here. And let's just keep it simple. We'll keep it as that for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and make that function up here. I'm going to say const handle user joined is a function that we are going to implement in just a second. And then secondly, we probably need to listen to when a user leaves our chat room or our webcam room. I'm going to say user left, and I'm going to say handle user left. All right, so const handle user left. Go ahead and do that. But before we implement these two things, I do want to code some more stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here. And I'm going to go ahead and just say client.join. So this is how you tell your browser to basically connect to the Agora services. I don't know why I keep saying Algora. And I'm going to go ahead and pass in some default configurations. So I need to tell it the app ID, the channel, the token, and then null. This is like, you can provide a UID if you want to, but we're going to let this just generate one for us. And I like to use promise chaining sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a promise chain. Hopefully you understand how promise chaining works. But when you call this method, it returns a promise. And when that promise resolves, you get a UID. So we want to kind of keep track of this UID to kind of display it in the page. I might bring in some React state in a bit to show you that. But for right now, what we're going to do is when you are actually connected to the Agora API, you need to start grabbing your local webcam and local audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return. This is how you do like promise chaining. Okay, so return. I'm going to say create microphone and camera tracks. Go ahead and call that. And we can clean this up a little bit. If you understand promise chaining, I could just do this, save it, and then I'm going to say .then, and I'll go ahead and get the tracks back. So what tracks is, these are pretty much like objects that describe your audio and your video. So you're going to need to use these, and you're going to have to take them and basically publish a message for other people in this room to know that you've connected. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of split this up a little bit. I'm going to say const audio track, and then I'm going to say video track is equal to tracks, because index 0 is your audio and index 1 will be your video. And then what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and just say return, actually I'm just going to say client.publish, and I'm going to go ahead and publish both of those. So I can just go ahead and say publish tracks here. Again, this will tell every other user on my webcam chat room basically what to subscribe to and how to like display those things. One thing that I forgot to mention is I'm using React 18, and there is a strict mode in React 18. And when you have strict mode on, every time you have an effect, React is going to like call it twice just to verify that you're doing the effect correctly. I'm still trying to learn more about strict mode in React 18, so I'm going to delete that because I'm going to run into some issues if I don't delete that, because I'm kind of a React noob at sometimes. So let's just delete it. And what we're going to do is when this component unmounts, actually, I'm not going to do anything yet. I think I'm going to keep it like that. And we need to basically implement these two functions that we talked about. Before I do that, I don't think we actually need to worry about these. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible for right now. So inside this component, we want to basically keep track of all of the users who are in the room, right? So I'm going to say const users and set users. I'm going to say use state, and that's going to be an empty array. And when we've kind of created this track, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get that UID. Actually, let me rephrase this. The problem with promise chaining is that I need the UID in this chain over here. So what you could do potentially is just do I'm going to say return a promise dot all, and go ahead and just do something like this. So that should give us access to the UID over here. Just going to do a little bit of refactoring. You might ask, why am I not doing async await? Honestly, at this point, I don't know. I probably should be. But now we have access to the UID in this little promise chain. And we want to basically say set users is equal to previous users. This is how you can kind of update state in React. So I'm going to go ahead and return the previous users, which happens to probably be an empty array. And I'm going to make a new object here, which has the UID, and it also is going to have the video track. Because what we're trying to do right now is just display the video on the page. We'll kind of worry about the audio in just a bit. So hopefully, if this all works, what we can do is we're going to just render out this. I'm going to say users.map, and then I'm going to get the user and going to go ahead and just try to render out something like this. Let's just go ahead and say user.uid. I want to make sure that these user IDs at least print out when I connect. And then we've kind of written a lot of code, so we need to make sure that we didn't break anything. All right, so let's go back to the app. If we click join room, we have some issues. Use state is not defined, so I forgot to import a couple of things. Let's go up here and make sure use state is actually imported from React. Use effect is also imported, so let's try it again. This happens when you're coding, you get a lot of bugs, especially when you're using JavaScript instead of TypeScript. So users is not defined. So again, I typed user wrong. This should probably be called users. Let's try it again. Third time's the charm, right? So when I clicked on that, it actually is going to connect to Agora, and it's going to connect to my webcam, and it's going to give me a UID, and we print it out here. So unfortunately, we don't have the webcam displaying yet, and we're going to work on that in just a second. But let me refresh my page, because now I have two things reading my webcam, and it's going to use my CPU up. All right, so we're going to make another component here. We're going to make a component called video player. How about that? And this, I'm going to go ahead and create another React component here. And this component is going to take in a user, right? So every user, we need to display their video. So this takes in a property called user. And we're going to do a use effect here just so that we can basically tell the page to play using this Agora library. So I'm going to say const, actually I'm going to say use effect. And we are going to go ahead and when this component mounts, we need to do some stuff. It turns out that the user is going to have a video track. Remember, we added that to the user. And there's a play method on that. And you can pass it a DOM element or a string that represents a DOM element. So in our case, we need to kind of have a container down here to tell this what to render out the video player to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put UID and just kind of print out the user.uid. And then I'm also going to say div. And I'm going to put a reference on here. So I'm going to say ref is equal to ref. In React, the ref is useful for like getting the lower level DOM object. So let's just go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I auto import this before I forget. And the idea is we're going to tell this thing to play or create a video player inside of this DOM element so that we can kind of view it. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some hard-coded inline stylings here. It's probably the easiest thing to do, just inline these, but you can do whatever CSS that you want to do. You want to do style components, that's cool. You want to do like CSS modules, that's cool as well. The world is your oyster. So let's go ahead and go back to the video room, and we're going to try to render that out. So instead of mapping over these and printing out like a div, we're going to try to render out video player. Make sure I give it a key, and then I'm also going to give it a user. So I'll do something like this, and I'll go ahead and close that tag. So if we auto import this as well, we should, hopefully, if I didn't screw anything up, we should see it now when I join the room. It should at least show my webcam. There I am. So I'm showing up in the bottom of my screen right now, and I could kind of do some stuff to restyle this to make it a little bit nicer. Maybe we can kind of do that. So if I go back, let me refresh this again. I don't want to use up my CPU. All right, so let's go back to the video room, and we want to basically wrap this video player in a CSS grid. So I'm going to go ahead and say div style, and I'm going to say display is grid. And then I'm also going to just go ahead and say like grid template columns. Let's see if I get some autocomplete going on. I'm going to say repeat 2. We just want 2 columns. And then we'll say like 1 FR. Actually, no, we'll say like 200 pixels maybe. Hopefully that looks okay. Let's try that out. So if we were to do that, we should get a grid going. And we should have like someone here and then someone over here. And we might have to also like center this as well. So I'm going to do some more inline stylings, and I'm going to utilize the power of flexbox to center this. So I'm going to say display is flex, and then I'm going to say, I believe it's justify content is center. And that'll kind of make these grid items be centered on the page. So let's go ahead and go back. Click join room. It might take a second. Again, this is slow because my computer just sucks, but this is actually really quick if you have a really powerful CPU. The Agora site is actually really responsive. So now I have a grid here, and I can actually see myself. Now, if I were to open a new tab and try to connect, it won't work yet because we haven't actually integrated with that event that we kind of talked about. So let's go ahead and refresh the page. And we're going to go ahead and just go up here to client on. I'm going to say user published, and then I'm going to say handle user joined. So inside of handle user joined, what we want to do is we want to tell our web page to basically subscribe to that user who came in. So when this event gets called, we get 2 arguments. We get a user and we get a media type. And we're going to go ahead and say client.subscribe to that user and that media type, right? So if we got an event that says user and audio, then we're going to listen to the audio. And when this happens, what we also want to do is check the media type. I'll say media type. If it's equal to video, we can just go ahead and let's not use GitHub's autocomplete because it is not what we want. We want to say set users. Actually, maybe this is what we want. We do want to say set the users to previous users like this. I think I'm missing a parenthesis. Let's actually, what am I missing? I think I forgot async. I always do that. I always forgot to put async on things. It's always good to use ESLint when you're coding because it kind of helps you know when you're doing something wrong. So now what we're doing is we're basically saying when we got a user, we're going to put that on this users array, and then React should just re-render those videos out. And we could do the same thing with media type of audio. And we're going to say user.audio track.play. And what can I do it right now? Because I'll get some feedback and it won't look that good, or it won't sound that great. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out for now, but that's kind of how you do it. And let's go ahead and go back to the UI and see if this works. So we'll click join room. We got one user who shows up, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up a new tab, and hopefully this doesn't mess up my screen recording because there's a lot going on my computer right now. So I'm gonna click join room as well. And what we should see hopefully is that now we have two webcams recording the same user. And if I go back to this tab, you can also see that that's showing up as well. So that's pretty cool. It's really easy to get that going. Let's go ahead and fix this logic. So when I disconnected that other tab, notice that this thing is still sticking around. We want to clean that up. And luckily there is an event that we can kind of listen to. Go ahead and uncomment that and uncomment this one. And what we want to do is when the user leaves, we basically need to clear up the React state so it deletes that from the page, right? I'm going to say set users, and I'm going to say previous users. And then I want to basically filter out the one that just got deleted. So I'm going to say previous users.filter. And I think we can filter on UID. So let's just go ahead and use what Copilot suggested because I'm a lazy programmer and Copilot is actually pretty good. But you do want to double check what they're doing. So make sure this is good. And this should filter out the users and get the ones that don't have that UID. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and go back and try this one more time. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect. Go ahead and connect this again. All right, so we should have two pages. At some point, this other guy should pop up. Yep. And now when I delete this other tab, React should re-render, and that user should hopefully just disappear. Okay. So that's kind of how you can create a really cool virtual webcam chat room. There are some more things that we kind of want to do, and that's all related to cleaning up. So the way React works is when you have a use effect, let's find where that use effect was. You want to kind of clean up any event listeners because you don't want those things sticking around as you join and leave. In fact, I should probably say, I should probably put the audio track here as well inside that user so we can play our own audio. Maybe it's not important to play our own audio, honestly, but you can do that if you want to. But what I'm trying to say is in the effect, typically you want to return a callback function. It's going to act as your cleanup function, okay? Let me go ahead and refresh this page so it's not using my webcam. And there's a couple of things that you want to make sure that you do when your component kind of unmounts, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you want to say client.unpublish, and you want to make sure that you unpublish yourself, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and say tracks. And I think we might not have access to tracks here, honestly. So we might have to store that in state, but you want to make sure you unpublish your tracks so that other users kind of see that you've unpublished. And then I'm also going to call another function called client.leave, which is basically going to inform Agora that you no longer want to be connected. So make sure you do that. And then you also want to make sure you call client off on those two events that we kind of had up here. You want to make sure you always clean up your events on your React components. Let's just go ahead and say client off. And that kind of takes the exact same arguments So now we've kind of cleaned up, right? You can also probably, reset the user's state back to null if you want to. There's actually, we probably could loop over our own tracks. So I could say for let local tracks of, or sorry, local track of local tracks. And I didn't save local tracks, so let me just go ahead and go up here. We want to keep track of our tracks so we can clean them up later. So I'm going to go ahead and say like local tracks, and then set local tracks is equal to an empty array. And then when we got those from our promise chain, remember we got that thing here, we want to go ahead and make sure we store that. So make sure you store those tracks so that later you can clean them up. You just have to basically say local track dot stop and then also local track dot close. Okay, so that'll kind of stop your page from consuming your webcam and consuming your mics and stuff like that. So with all that being done, I mean, like, you pretty much have a pretty nice application, and you can kind of expand upon this and hook this up to your own personal websites if you need to do some type of like widget where you can connect to a customer service person and actually see them talking, or if you need to, hear them. Let me just check this out, make sure it works one last time. So I'm gonna go ahead and join the room, and we should have 2 tabs now connected to the same webcam virtual call room. Go ahead and delete this guy, and it should clean up. This guy disappeared and everything was kind of unmounted. So yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to show you for this quick little overview. It's been something I've been kind of looking into and having some fun learning about this API. It's been really fun. So if you are interested, be sure to go to the description. I'll have a link to the code base here on a GitHub repo. And I think that's about it. So if you have any questions, leave a comment below. I'll probably publish a couple more videos like this, just sharing my experiences with this and see if I can build something interesting. So anyway, have a good day and happy coding.